Today's sutra work is going to talk a little bit about pranayama. And so I'd really like to take this time right now to connect with our breath flow. And I know we've done that all before, but let's just take a moment here. And I want you to just focus on the flowing nature of the breath. Don't think of it as an inhale or an exhale, but think of it as this endlessly flowing pulsation, and see if you can connect with that aspect. I want you to try to feel the exhale, and just make sure you're letting yourself, you don't have to push it out. Just make sure you're letting yourself exhale and noticing that little pause at the bottom of the exhale, and then just let the inhale come to you as effortlessly as you can. Science has shown us that this space at the end of the exhale and the pause there is one of the most overlooked parts of our breath flow. And it contributes to a lot of imbalance in our breath chemistry. So just let yourself notice the last half of your exhale and that pause. You don't have to hold it, just have to let it happen. And then allow the eyes to open halfway. You can make some small circles with your spine. Okay, so, oh, hey Octavia.
Hi, Tara.
Oh, you're right behind the camera for me. I couldn't see you there. Hey, Tara. And Anju, I didn't forget about you. Sorry. All right. So last week we ended our discussion with Sutra, I believe, 3.6, where it started to talk about asana, and we talked a little bit about asana and stillness. Hey, Bob.
Did anyone hear Babaji talk about that? It was
This was
right
cool.
at the beginning of a meditation during the intensive, and he said your asana is the still point in your meditation seat. And I see you nodding, Usha. I'd never heard him say that, and I was like, wow, he just picked it out of the ether, and we had just been talking about that. That was really special.
That was like, it was like word for word from the sutra. And if you've been keeping up with the sutras over the last few years, that happens like every couple months. He just pulls these literal sutras out of the ether, and I'm like, that was what we just read.
And then says it so much better than
Yeah.
any of the books.
You know, gosh, it's just so cool. Well, without further ado, this sutra is trying to talk to us about it. It keeps on saying like the real asana practice, and then it's going to say the real pranayama practice, and the real pratyahara practice, and it's working its way up the quote unquote 8 limbs of yoga, but more or less just the stepping stones of our practice, where we end up going, step by step. Once you can sit still, for example, in your asana, then you can start to focus on your breath, right? But if you can't sit still, sort of hard to start working with your breath. So it's natural that that's like a stepping stone. And so here you see in the pink at the bottom, he says, now after asana, this yogi must practice pranayama. For this yogi, however, this pranayama is unique. And so Swami Lakshman Ju is translating here. I found Swami Lakshman Ju's translation to be much more accessible. Maybe we'll dive into Singh's a little bit. I do have a little bit prepared for from Muktananda's translation when we get to a point that seems good to use that. But for now, let's just open the door here to Lakshman Ju's translation of the sutra. And
Yeah. Nanda Devi, can you see the text on the screen?
I guess that's a good question for everyone. I know sometimes I have to do some stuff here, like spotlighting.
And you're welcome to, some people like to see everybody, but you can also pin.
Yeah, so if each of you, if you were to pin my video, it would pop the screen up really big so you could read the text. And then when we're discussing it, I highly recommend unpinning it because it feels like you're in this group. It's really fun. And if anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, chat box and I can try to help you while we're working.
Is that working out, Nanda Devi? Can you see it?
I wish I could, but I'm just on my phone.
Yeah.
And I can't.
The
Yeah.
phone.
I don't think it pinch zooms, so I don't think I can.
Yeah.
You're right.
Well, it's nice to hear your voice, and I won't put you on the spot to read that then.
Right on. And
Okay, call on me for something else when it's
Okay.
bigger.
Thanks. Yeah, we will.
Absolutely. Hi, Geeta. Will you read the pink paragraph?
Okay. Initially, this yogi experiences the gross movements of breathing in and breathing out. Then, after some time, through the continuity of fixing awareness on these two breaths, his breath, prana, becomes so very subtle, sukshma, vritya, that even he can't observe when he is breathing in and breathing out. Following this subtle state of breath, sukshma vritti, the state which is said to be beyond this subtle state, sukshmatita, comes into existence.
Well, for the sake of discussion, I think it's important to give ourselves 30 seconds, 3 or 4 breaths. Just let it really calm down inside. And see if you can let your breath get really subtle for a moment. And then as you're doing this, I want to just say a little bit more. Swami Lakshman Ju has a footnote for this paragraph because he says after doing this for some time. And when you look into that footnote, it says some time means 30 minutes or a day or 2 weeks or 6 months or 2 years. This is one of those experiences we can't necessarily conjure up when we want to, but maybe, throughout our practice, you've had a glimpse into it. And so with that little taste that you got just now, or with the past experience maybe you've had, does anyone feel like they can relate to this concept of when the breath gets so subtle that you can't actually observe if it's in or out? Kona Bob? Yeah, do you want to say a few words on that? Kona Bob.
Yeah, it's
I didn't mean to.
as
Yeah.
time goes on, it happens more and more. It's like I was just talking to Shirley this morning about how I've tried I tried going back to using my mala when I was meditating and doing Om Namah Shivaya, but when I do that, I don't have that experience as often as if I just sit and watch my breath. I was talking to Shirley about that this morning, and I said there's times when, you know, if your mind, if you find yourself not only going into that state where you can't, where your breath is just not doing its thing, but at the same time, if you're really drowsy and stuff, then I feel like, you know, that's when I grab my mala and use that. It helps. And then I open my eyes and use my mala and my mantra, and it helps focus everything so that I don't get too drowsy. But if I am not in that drowsy situation, I really enjoy the experience of going into meditation and having my breath stop. It happens to me a lot when we're doing the Ganesh mantra too. It's like, how can I keep chanting? My breath isn't moving. But so I move my lips, but my breath doesn't really want to move. So these are just a couple experiences that I've had with this. Any question?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's cool that you brought the attention to the fact that to approach this level of pranayama, one has to be very like keen, awake, you know, vital. You know, it isn't the kind of thing that you can sustain when it's like that extra late meditation that you're trying to fit in at the end of a super long day. This is like, it's approaching such a subtle state that you have to be in a really clear state. And in the very next paragraph, it sort of talks about this. We'll look at that in just a minute. But yeah, absolutely. The subtleties of this experience are really noteworthy. And in fact, it's like exactly what they talk about next. So. Thanks, Bob. Anyone else feel like they've gotten an experience of this that's noteworthy for them? Something where they've approached a subtle aspect of the breath and had this like, I don't know if I'm breathing in or breathing out. I think we might recognize it more as like Bob said, it feels like our breath is like stopping, you know, and you're like not sure how long it stopped for. Oops. All right, well, let's look at this next paragraph, the purple. It's still the same paragraph, but the next half, it starts to talk a little bit more about where Bob was going.
Anju, if you can see the text, will you read it? The yellow paragraph? Or purple?
Purple.
Purple paragraph.
Yeah.
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, great.
Okay. When this yogi experiences a state of Chiksmatita, he has the apprehension that he will lose consciousness of awareness. But in fact, his maintaining continuity of awareness does not allow this to happen. Now this yogi experiences an internal throbbing, spandana, and this throbbing again vibrates his awareness in fullness.
So a couple of things there. We've got the idea that when you approach this really subtle experience of the breath, you will probably think, I'm falling asleep. I'm slipping. I can't maintain this. I need to take a deep breath. I'm about to lose my focus. It's like, it feels like a state of awareness that we're not accustomed to, that we're sort of used to associating with falling asleep, perhaps. But if you're really getting there consciously and you're not actually falling asleep, if you really are just watching the breath and you're really feeling that subtle state creeping in, what Lakshmanji is translating here is that you definitely won't fall from this because you've gotten there consciously. And what can happen is you begin to experience the pulsation of spanda, which really is sort of the energetic breath that's occurring in us, in our subtle bodies, this internal and this inhaling and exhaling, so to speak, of energy. To add something.
Yeah, as Satyam was talking, I felt like we probably can all relate to meditating and feeling tired or drowsy. And I'm curious if anyone has the experience of like being in that almost like sleepy, drowsy state and being able to get past it. Like maybe you have a special trick you do, as Bob shared. He likes to get out his mala and do Om Namah Shivaya at that point. And I would love to hear either your special trick or a time where you felt like you got past that drowsiness and like what that might have been like. In this case, he talks about this like internal throbbing that he calls spandana, but maybe it felt a little different for you, or you'd have a different description. So I'll just plant that seed and you can take a moment
That's
to
a great question.
reflect. Yeah, Pujari.
Sorry,
Hi.
1 second.
I find that whenever I sit with you guys, I get tired, like immediately. And today, immediately from the screen is coming all of this energy. And I don't know if it's you two or from the intensive, but it's like a little electrical current. So the drowsiness that I tend to feel is enhanced and nourished by the energy that's coming from Zoom. It's just amazing. Another time I used sleepiness was Janabai was sitting next to me in Guru Gita up in the Shoshone temple, and I was so tired and I couldn't stay awake. And then from her came the Shakti of her own practice. And I was like caught on to that wave. So she helped me. And it was really funny because Janeshwar was sitting, the opposite end of the temple, and he said, "Oh, it's so hard to stay awake today. You should have sat next to your wife."
Right on.
So, the Sangha, it just reminds me how important you are, the Sangha, and all of you, and
Yes.
thank goodness for it,
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Pujari. And I know what you mean about these Thursday sessions. I feel like similar to Monday night, this Thursday class, even though it's been in a different form over the years, it's like this time slot has been a Sangha gathering for so long. And so when we tune in, there really is a strong momentum and flow of Shakti that we're tuning into. And sometimes I feel like it's being with the Sangha and there's so much energy that can actually induce that drowsiness. Like it's not you, it's not like, oh, Pujari didn't get enough sleep last night, It's like you're here and you're in this like huge flow of energy, and if you can open up, which it sounds like you do, from appreciating and finding gratitude and connecting with the Sangha, it's almost like you have a bigger container for the energy to flow through, so it doesn't feel bound, which manifests sometimes as drowsiness, I think.
It's who knows what the day will bring, right? Who knows when I tune into you guys, like who knows if it'll be drowsiness or if it'll be the other.
It's really interesting that this sense of drowsiness is simply associated with practice on a lot of levels. Like when there's a lot of energy, you feel drowsy. When you're approaching subtle states of awareness, you feel drowsy, and it's no mistake that Babaji's often answered questions where people say they feel like they get so sleepy, or they feel like they're going to fall asleep, but then the second practice is over, they feel good. He says, oh, you're approaching the Turiya state, which is a state that is often associated with that sense of like almost like falling asleep or falling into it. And so this is interesting. There's so many different angles coming at this same experience. Anyone else want to share based on that sort of prompt? If you want to revisit the prompt.
Usha, was that a hand or just your hand?
It was a not sure that I wanted my hand up or not.
Whoa, I caught you.
That's so true.
I have to tell you that all the time on Monday night, I've been struggling with this drowsiness and trying to figure out how to stay with it and not drop off. So I'm really glad to have this conversation. It's really helpful. And and just to know that happens to others, not just me. And then when Bob was speaking about, I had the experience once when we were at Shoshone and doing the Ganesh mantra, and I just couldn't do it. I stopped and I couldn't do it anymore. And I asked Babaji about that, what I should do, and he said nothing. That's just what happened. So I don't know, that's not the same as pranayama, but that it does happen where you just like can't do it anymore. The mantra.
Yeah.
Usha, something that has helped me when I feel drowsy, I feel like it's switching my mentality a little, where it's almost like, okay, right on the other side of this veil is like so much energy. And
Veil.
so I
Yeah.
instead of, sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'm not connecting, and that's why I feel drowsy or tired. But instead, it's like, no, there's just so much energy, and it just gives me that like little like opening and inspiration to expand beyond where I am. So I imagine on Monday night there's like more energy than any of us could ever fathom. And so it's just like, okay, it's right there, and I just need to like break out of this shell, you know.
That's really- I like that you use the word veil. It's really insightful. Interesting. I'll come back to that. Nanda Devi. Oh, and then Bob. Sorry. Go ahead.
So I kind of like when I notice that I'm feeling drowsy during a meditation class, because to me it means that I'm in a really surrendered state, and I'm feeling like if I feel relaxed and open enough to feel sleepy, like then I feel relaxed and open enough to really connect with the energy in that class. And I went through this phase where I was training for a marathon, and I was going to meditation classes at Omananda. So I would drive from Estes Park down to Loveland and run like 10 miles or something, and then drive to Fort Collins and go to a meditation class. And like those were the best classes because I was so tired from doing that run that like all I could do was sit and release.
That makes me think of when Baba and Faith talk about the days of being with Rudy, and they'd say, man, we would work so hard, and then we'd come into the temple and like sit on the cement floor and just be too tired to have any resistance, so all the energy could just flow through. Do you have any secrets or tricks of like being in that state where you're tired, but instead of it being like a drowsy falling asleep, it is a way of you working and opening and surrendering?
Well, I don't know if you guys remember this. A few years ago, Baba taught us a practice of where he was at Shoshone, and he taught us a practice of where the eyes are like almost closed, but you're still gazing down. And so I reach for that practice when I'm feeling drowsy.
Sounds like you also have a sense of how to access like a connection to the energy when that veil is so thin. It sounds like the fact that you recognize it as a sign of energy, and so it's like it feels like when you're feeling drowsy in a practice and you can recognize it, you're not in it too much. You can actually like sort of have a little bit of separation. It's really, it seems like you're able to actually connect more clearly to the energy that you're seeking in that moment. It's, they describe in the sutras the waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep state. Those are the three states. And they say in the waking state, you have the most awareness, but you have the least connection to your subtle energy. You're the most aware, but you're least connected. Then they go, oh, in the dreaming state, you're more confused about life, but you're more connected to the energy that's like within you. So it's this like weird trade-off. And then of course in the dreamless sleep state, you have no awareness at all, but you're completely immersed in your energetic state. And so it's like this inverted sort of graph that, like, how it goes from left to right. And so if you are in that drowsy state, as we're calling it, it's actually almost like how the heart chakra, how Baba always says the heart chakra is the middle of the chakras. So therefore it has a lot of depth, but it's not so deep that it's hard to access. It's almost like that's just this prime territory. And when I heard Nanda Devi say, I actually recognize that as like prime territory to do my practice. I think that's really insightful and something that I will remember. I think any of us to just remember that the next time you're feeling that way could change the ball game, I think.
So we should all train for a marathon. Just kidding.
Fun discussion. Bob, did you want to add anything to that? I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I've talked to you before about how I like to listen to what we refer to as the Om sound, but it's actually this very high ringing sound. And when I get into that state, that is left. Everything else is kind of falling away. It's hard to concentrate on too much else, but the Om sound just gets louder and louder. And so when I find myself falling into that state, I try to connect to that and just keep my focus on it. It really, really helps me. The other thing I wanted to say is whenever I see Baba on Monday night and he starts slowly going forward like this, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going into the Turiya state. I want to keep up with him. And it just makes me feel so grateful to see him go into that state. So those are the two things I wanted to mention.
Thanks, Bob. That's super helpful. Once again, you predicted the next paragraph, which literally describes the divine sounds rushing in your mind. But that's great. And then also, I think it's good that for everyone to have that moment to recognize that, yeah, when Babaji is sort of leaning forward like that, it's like, don't miss the train. That's cool. Jump on the train. So I'm going to share my screen again.
Wow, nice mug, Geeta. Is that from Kona?
Let's see it.
I think we have that same mug.
Yeah.
Show us the mug.
I've been looking for that mug. You have it. Oops. Did I flip this again? Oh, well. Oh, wait. I'm flipped. Hold on. Sorry. It's going to be hard to read backwards. One sec. And we're back.
You see it.
There we go. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and jump into the next paragraph, which is a continuation of this thought. Talks a little bit more. Tara, what do you think? You want to give us a read if you can? Is the screen big enough there? Everything good?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. All good. When he is actually affecting the supreme pranayama, he experiences tremendous divine sounds rushing in his mind. Once this supreme pranayama is accomplished, this yogi will never fall from his reality of consciousness. This pranayama is explained in this way.
So there you go. So similar to what Bob was talking about, like when you actually start to fall into this space, the possibly the Om sound or other tremendously divine sounds, perhaps that we don't commonly talk about, come to mind. And as Bob was saying, they might provide a little tether for you at that state. And it's interesting how they talk about the yogi will never fall from his reality of consciousness. So this is big, I think, and this was translated in all three translations had a little nod to this statement about once you've sort of ridden your breath into this state, you don't fall off the saddle, so to speak, when you reach it. You really do arrive. And so all three translations made a point to make that sentence just like as clear as day like that. I'll read Muktananda's real quick. He says, the state of centeredness from which there is no return is pranayama, control of the breath. The state of centeredness from which there is no return. I will say that the breath is constantly described by Babaji and Muktananda as, your greatest ally, because it's always with you, and once you learn how to use it effectively, you got your greatest ally by your side in every situation. And I'd like to introduce the idea that we've been working on here a lot in our recent upper level training. We did a whole day today on the breath in teaching yoga. It was really phenomenal. And one of the things that manifested in this training that we, sort of like a new addition to our practice, was the thing I was guiding earlier, which is where instead of always associating the power of your breath with the inhale, which I know is powerful, there's no doubt, but to also begin associating tremendous power with the end of your exhale. It's very different. It's a different sword, so to speak, to wield, but as we've been working with it in our training and in our personal practices, I've found that the end of that exhale and the space after it have a way of like shedding thoughts, shedding tension very quickly, and accomplishing what I was trying to accomplish with that strong inhale. It almost like it drops everything, and I find myself just like there. Not to mention that, as I was talking about earlier, research about the breath has shown that the last half of our exhale and the pause after the exhale is the most commonly overlooked part of our breath flow and contributes the most to imbalanced pH levels in our breath and blood as a result. And so there's a lot more that can be said, and I'm not going to go into all of it, but the idea is that science and personal practice have started to highlight this part of the breath that I personally overlooked quite a bit, I think.
Do you want to guide a little bit of pranayama just so people can feel that?
Do you all want to just take a couple of minutes to do that? Okay. A couple nods. All right. And if you don't, you can go to Marble Madness online and watch some marble games while I do this. Okay. Similar to how we started the class. Try to relate to your breath as a flowing entity, as something that's always gently moving. This helps you start to take your grip off of the breath It's okay to use very minimal effort to smooth out your breath flow, but feel it as a flow. Swallow, relax the throat. Try to visualize the face and the shoulders relaxing as well. It might be beneficial to draw the chin in just a centimeter, just a little, in case that neck is creeping forward. The breath is silent. There's no constriction in the throat. And the breath is soft. Picture it like a feather floating down through the sky. The inhale, it floats to one side. The exhale, it floats to the other. So light. So light. Keep focusing on the flowing nature of the breath. And try to feel it passing through the four parts. The exhale, the pause, the inhale, the pause. Check back in with the throat, might want to swallow. Check back in with relaxing the face and the shoulders. Allow the breath to remain flowing, always flowing. But pay just a little extra attention to the exhale and the pause after it. Let yourself feel comfortable in that effortless pause. If you feel uncomfortable at any time, breathe however you want for a few moments. Totally relax. And then just gently approach it again. A practice like this should feel sustainable. Like you could do this for hours if you wanted to. For the last minute, let yourself approach Shuksha Matita, the subtlest state of the breath. Let yourself approach it. I'm going to finish by reading Paul Rep's poem. Please just maintain the work you're doing. He says, eyes closed or half closed, seeing released. Let breathe as you let wind blow, rain fall. Enter one breath, wholly. Going with, not against, the harmony. And let yourself make some small circles with the spine.
Sometimes it can be challenging to talk after doing that kind of work, so it's okay if you're feeling quiet. But if anyone would like to share anything they experienced working with the breath just now, or maybe you work with the breath a lot and you have an experience that didn't just happen but you're excited to share, that would be okay too. Did you notice anything new? Yeah, Christy, and
It should be just turn the mic on and talk.
great.
So,
Oh, she says she's muted.
No, no, it's her video.
Okay.
You guys can hear Christy, right?
yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay,
Good.
go for it.
So when I first heard about the inhale and pausing at the top of the inhale and the exhale, I thought that you really had to lengthen it, like do some kind of square breath. And it caused me quite a bit of tension because it was hard. And the more I have worked with breath awareness, I've come to realize that the space that we make at the bottom and the top of the breath doesn't necessarily need to be temporal in nature, that just to feel the very, very bottom is like really good. So one thing that helped me get there was to imagine that I was like, it was my heart breathing, like it was my energetic body that breathes, so that, because I know like the mind doesn't have any, it doesn't get to work with my energy body, like they can be separate. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna let my heart breathe and then it, like, my mind can just sort of let it go. And I find that's really helpful also at the beginning when we were talking about how to get to a state when you don't really notice any difference in like where you are with the breath. I always find that that happens most often when I am breathing with my heart, so to speak. So that's what I try to, I kind of naturally cultivated that just now and had a lot of success. So, really good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Christy. I feel like that was a really poetic but also real way of describing like letting go of doership and almost just like entrusting that system to your heart and energetic body.
That's great. Yeah, getting breathing from not from your head, and how that's. I think you're right. It's definitely associated with those pauses. Those pauses really do represent a space that's beyond the mind. So that's really helpful. Cool. I'm gonna try that. Anyone else? Yeah, Anju, go ahead.
I just find it so like incredible with all of these like sutras, like in the ShambhavAnanda, like how for me they bring up like kind of this progression of practice. They're super accessible, but like the end is just as magnificent as, you know, when we were reading about the ShambhavAnanda. And like in working with the breath, just like this evolution of when you're starting to do pranayama, even though, you know, you can be told so many times, like, don't force it, you know, don't use your will. But it's, you know, watching that evolution in myself even, and I know I still have like so much further to go, but to like watch how that's changed, like, you know, not being able to not use my will in working with the breath, and then now being able to like witness the breath kind of just arising and doing what it does, but being aware of it in a different way than, you know, it's passing throughout my day, you know, actually being able to be like paying attention to it, but not from that mindful space, kind of, and what we were just talking about, kind of breathing from the heart. And I don't know, it's really like brings my practice to a new level for whatever reason, like being able to access it from this, you know, very accessible place. And it's just kind of, yeah, I don't know if I have any more words.
Really helpful. Yeah, it's like it's using our will, as Paul Rep said, going with, not against the harmony. You know, it's like how can we use our will to go with the harmony, like the breath, with the breath? Like, why does it always have to go against everything? You know, like, and I think it takes a retraining, which is to be expected. And honestly, this is parallel to the work that we're doing in our yoga practice a lot these days, is trying to go with our body and with sort of the way that we're sort of built inside, instead of like from the outside in, like all these different angles. And so, yeah, it's not a new direction, right? Bob always tells us this is pretty ancient direction, but for some reason we're all just waking up to it, you know? But thank goodness. Did anyone find it just challenging, confusing, awkward? I mean, and please don't think I would take it personally. I personally have, in my time working up to this moment, like with the specifics, that specific practice that we just went through, it took a lot of repetitions. I felt very uncomfortable for a long time. Science tells us that I don't really want to say so much here about it, but generally most of us are hyperventilating most of the day, taking too big of inhales, and not paying any attention to that last half of our exhale. And so we're a little imbalanced. Our body learns how to live like that. And then when we start to balance it out by actually having that last half of our exhale and the pause, when our pH starts to balance out, it feels funny. It felt funny to me, like uncomfortable funny. And so if you experience anything like that, you know, it means you're on the right track, as Babaji always tells us, right? You know, so, and if it felt confusing, you're on the right track.
One thing that I want to clarify, and I see your hand, Dharma, just because, you know, with breathing and then feeling funny, it's really important to be gentle. And so everything that Satyam's talking about, like noticing the exhalation and the space after the exhale, it should still be natural, just so that you don't feel like you're making it happen and then feeling funny and then being like, oh, but I'm supposed to feel funny. So be very gentle, and then just go to your natural breathing if you feel funny, and then come back to it, just to make sure you're getting a balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide.
Absolutely.
Dharma?
I was trying to imagine while exhaling that I was actually inhaling, because I think I have like an idea in my mind of how my breath works. And if I could just for a moment, almost like just a little parlor trick of the mind, just imagine that as I'm exhaling, I'm actually inhaling, because I have a mental sense of what that is, that it was just kind of an interesting experiment to try.
I can feel that. I will say that what I'm feeling in it right now is it gets me to work with my exhale more thoroughly, but I can feel that it's almost like the pendulum swings the other way. Where now I feel like I'm abusing my exhale just like I abuse my inhale constantly. So I will just leave you with that, although I really did appreciate that switch. And to be perfectly honest, it does align with the sutras in the sense that, and I can't go too deep into this, but that spanda, which I said before, is the energetic equivalent of our breath, and which is where this practice leads us to. It's a pulsation, just like your breath, but on an energetic level. The spanda principle states that that it's always creating and destroying simultaneously, or so to speak, inhaling and exhaling simultaneously. And so there is a sense of that in the text where it's almost like we can relate to both parts of the breath equally, and they're almost interchangeable at a certain point. And I think that's sort of where this text is sort of pointing us towards, a time when we don't know whether we're inhaling or exhaling. You know, and so I think it's like you're actually alluding to some of the more subtle aspects of where this course will, where this practice sort of takes us. Fun. So fun having these discussions amongst practitioners. It's just, for me, I just like so grateful. You know, I'm grateful also to teach absolutely new people. That's grateful in its own way, but this is pretty special.
I know time's up, so I wanted.
Is it? Oh my God, you're kidding me.
When Satyam read the Paul Reps poem about like following the harmony, something that came up for me, that's going to be like a little test / sankalpa that I try this week. Have you ever been in an uncomfortable situation and like taken a deep breath because you're a great yogi and you're like trying to like surrender and like pull back? I see some smiles.
Sure.
And if you're with another yogi and they recognize you taking the deep breath, it's actually like kind of
It sort of points to their shortcomings.
like it's like they're upset at you for taking that deep breath. So my little inspiration was like, wow, what if instead of like I have to, you know, if I tried to like find that surrender at the bottom of the exhale, like totally silently and no one ever knew. So I know that that is a pattern of mine of like taking that deep breath that's almost too visible. So I'm going to try that, and I'm really excited to find my own results. But if you have results, I would be excited to hear yours too.
And I would like to conclude this sesh with, and Bob, go ahead, jump in. Go ahead. There you go.
I was just thinking about next time you guys are out snorkeling, hold something heavy like a rock or something heavy, and then exhale and let yourself sink down. And there's this feeling that comes over you of complete emptiness, and it just is a beautiful feeling. And you can't do it unless you're snorkeling. So I just thought I'd throw that out there for you to try.
Don't worry, guys. We're going to have a Sangha retreat as soon as we can.
Oh, man, that'll be great.
And we'll all try it together.
That's true. But I did want to end this session with some stuff just like what Bob and Abhaya are talking about, which is I know a lot of you, or a couple of you, have reached out to me and said, you know, how do I get to that next level, you know, with my philosophy practice? You know, is it just this class, or I just show up? And the answer is the next level is trying to like relate to these practices that we're talking about and to work with them, and then to put it into words. The actual act of writing about these experiences is not just for your head. It really isn't. When you take a moment to write about or reflect on the work that we're looking at, it's actually that moment when you're having to almost teach it in a way. And so many studies have shown that you retain 90% of what you learn when you teach it, and at most 15 to 20% that you learn when you come to a class like this. And so self-study and teaching are, without a doubt, no comparison. If you want to learn something, self-study, meaning you actually look at this text after this class by yourself, and then writing a little bit about it, that's the next level. And I know it seems sort of simple, but it's really, well, it should be that simple. I hope it seems simple. And so I will nudge those of you who are looking for the next level to go. I'll have this video up at konalaniyoga.org/practices. It's on our website, it says practices, and then you see Study Buddy. And just like challenge yourself between now and 2 weeks from now to actually put into words how this is going for you. You have a really strong practice that we did together. It's pretty clear. And like Abhaya made up a little Lila Sankalpa for herself. Bob talked about one. See how it goes. And then we can start our next class looking back a little bit at some of the comments. So for those of you who are reaching out, that's what I would recommend.
And if you don't want to do that, you're all still doing great, and we love seeing you,
Oh,
and
God,
you
yeah.
add so much. So take it or
Please.
leave
Yeah,
it.
take it or
It's
leave it.
perfect either way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I look forward to this class so much. Thank you all so much. Yay.
Take care, everybody.
Brahmaswarupaniravarnam Trilokanatam Shri Gurudevam Om Namo Nityanandam Nityanandam Brahmanandam.
That's your husband, right, Radharani?